coming towards the end of your career, moved into more of an admin type role. How was that transition for you?
That initial transition for me was a little bit rough. I mean, I was still in the community and, had a little bit of rough ending with on the team side of the house. And it was like, hey, I had other good leadership there or guys that were still asking me to come out either to their company or the team again. And then I was like, well, if I do that, I'm literally going to come right up to the butt end of my career and have no time to transition at all. Because I always hear horror stories about that, right? People waiting until the last second within the last 3 months or month or even 3 days, be like, oh, I need to check out. And it's like, that's not right. I've seen a lot of people set up for failure in that way, especially because bluntly, like a lot of commands, like you become your number at that point. They don't care. We're like, we'll use you all the way until the day you get out. And I had another good friend, name is also Derek. He was an officer, but he was on the support battalion side. Like I said, still in the Raider battalion community, and we still get to facilitate the teams because that's where all the enablers are trained that facilitate or integrate with the teams. And he was like, hey, I need to, a replacement for the battalion operations chief out here, and it was a good fit, and it allowed me to have time to go to programs like the Honor Foundation, to help you find your golden thread and your why and to move forward. And at the end of like that program, while still in as well, because of the network of the Honor Foundation, I ended up finding out about USC had a program that was called MBV, which is the Master of Business for Veterans, and that allowed me to go right into that even while still on active duty.
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this.
You grew up in Iowa. My mistake. That's what I was thinking, though. And you did the MCMAP program in the Marine Corps.
Correct.
Were you a wrestler as a kid growing up?
I did a little bit of wrestling. I actually never stuck with that. I stuck more with football and baseball.
Bring that mic closer. Or one of the two.
One of the two, me or myself. All right. So growing up, I did dabble a little bit in the wrestling side of the house, but I never actually stuck with that. It just wasn't my forte. Even though I believe everybody in Iowa ends up wrestling at one point or another, but I stayed with baseball and football primarily.
I was going to say, I thought it was a requirement in Iowa to actually be a wrestler.
I know him and no legend Dan Gable, right?
So we've already hit on it. Grew up in Iowa. Big family, small family?
I'm going to call it a medium family. I got 2 other brothers, parents still together. So,
where do you fall in the pecking order? Are you youngest or oldest?
Technically, I'm the middle child, but my little brother was like 13 years later type of deal. So it was like I was the youngest for 13, 14 years, and then he came along, which is great. And but I left when he was 4 or 5 years old. So it was kind of created a little bit of a space there. It was almost like we were acquaintances or good friends versus brothers until our latter half of years when he became a young adult himself. And then he actually went to the Marine Corps as well.
Kind of in following in your footsteps?
In essence, yeah.
What did mom and dad do?
Mom and dad. So mom was a longtime secretary or assistant manager of a radio host from our small town. And then now she's a secretary in a law office. And my dad was a farmer growing up for most of the part, and then he did various jobs in the farming community, and now he drives a truck.
Is your family multi-generations in Iowa, or mom and dad first ones there?
Multi-generation. So all the way from my great-grandparents up to now, current.
Any plans for you to work your way back, quote-unquote, home?
It has been a thought or idea. They would love me to be back there, even though I love what we've established out here. However, I think land is definitely especially like for hunting and fishing and stuff like that. Still miss that. Love going home and visiting. I think it's a great place to raise a family. But right now in the immediate future, no. But definitely, I think long range wise, at least the goal ultimately would be if we have a place there and here, but we'll see how that goes out.
Did you grow up hunting?
Yes.
Bow or rifle?
Shotgun, actually.
Oh, okay. So more
until the last couple of years, it was actually illegal to use a rifle for any kind of deer hunting in Iowa. So it was only shotgun only.
And what about now? Are you still just primarily rifle, or have you transitioned into bow? I know that bow has gotten real popular the last couple of years.
So that was something I wouldn't mind getting into as a new hobby. I just need to get the discipline to find the space and time to do it. So
it's amazing how life gets in the way.
It does, quite often, actually.
As a young boy growing up, was school a priority to you? Did you enjoy the academic side of it?
I did not. I was actually, I wasn't a great student, I'll tell myself there. And actually, I've actually never said this or really talked about it before, is when I was younger, I was actually had to go to like special assistant classes I don't know if it was like an ADHD thing or whatnot, but I was a little bit slower on like math or English. And then eventually it kicked in, but it was never a priority to me. I was always wanting to either, go play in the mud or art or something like that. It was more appealing to me.
Math is never, well, I'll say for most people, including myself, I struggled with it. I look back on it now and my kids are just thriving in it and getting ready to go off to college. And I say, how do you understand the advanced stuff, the calculus and all that? It doesn't register for me.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you have to re-engage it as an adult, whether it was something to do.
Help me, Dad. They're like,
It's like, well, let's YouTube that.
As you were coming towards your adulthood, what was your plan? What were you thinking about for your future coming out of high school?
So as a young kid, I was always, playing around with the, hay bales, making forts and stuff like that. And I loved the movies like Platoon and Rambo. And I was always like, I always want to do something like that. I thought I was always going to go into like law enforcement and or military. And that was kind of my motivation. So I was like that from knee high to grasshopper, thinking I wanted to do something in that nature. So the transition going into it was pretty seamless for me. It wasn't a lot of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. And that really triggered after, so I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade. We were on a larger farm, like a 300-acre farm, and then ended up selling it, and we moved to a small acreage. So up until that point, even at that age, I was like, well, I'm going to grow up to take over the farm. That's what we do. And as like family business type deal. And since when that was no longer on the table, that's insert military option or law enforcement.
And you did the delayed entry program.
I did, yeah.
When you started looking at the military, was it only the Marine Corps, or did you check out the other branches?
Glad you asked that. Actually, originally, it was always, Marine Corps was always intriguing to me. However, I was initially on a Army enlistment. Before I actually went into the latest program, I was with Army recruiters and I was supposed to go on a Ranger contract. And then actually my older brother had went into the Army at that time. And then he got really sick towards the end of it. Actually made it through their basic training, that's what they call it, and went into their A school or whatnot. And then he got really sick and had trouble with the whatever final they had, whether it was physical or exercise. And he was like throwing up and stuff like that. And not about that, but like they were going to make him start at like training day 1 or just get out. Like you were never there. Like here's your 14. And it obviously rubbed him the wrong way. I was like, well, that's kind of not fair. So he's like, well, I'll take my papers and go back. And because of that initial treatment through there, I was like, well, I don't want to deal with that. So I literally walked across the hallway to the Marine Corps, made it the easiest sell in the world. I'm like, I don't care about your money or bonuses. I just want to be infantry. They're just like, what? It's like, yep.
Come on, put up a little bit of a fight.
Exactly.
Make this a little hard on us.
But so that's kind of where that came into play. And then, so when I was a junior in high school, I was in delayed entry program. So
that initial looking at the Army, though, were they talking about giving you a Ranger contract straight out of the get-go?
Yes, that was on the table.
And were you not thinking anything like that for the Marine Corps at that time?
At that time, no, because it really didn't exist outside of recon. But then you still had to go through and do your induct through, after you go through the School of Infantry. That's when you do those types of things. And since they didn't really offer that from the get-go, I found that out after getting in. But I just thought, hey, Marines were leading themselves. So that's the route I went.
To put it in perspective, what year did you graduate high school?
I graduated high school early, a half year early. I graduated in 2001, but January of 2001.
Just because you wanted to get out of there? I mean, that kind of goes against you not liking academics.
Right. So with that being, I took that opportunity and ran with it. So when I was in the language program and it came up, they were like, hey, this kid broke his leg or something down, something crazy like that. And they called me and like, hey, are you available? Like, if you can get your graduation early, because it's after the new year, and obviously they know how that works. And would you be willing to fill this spot? And I was like, why not? So they literally came down that day or next day and, talked to the academics and the secretary at the high school and like, yeah, he's good to graduate. So that's how that happened. It was literally within a week. It was actually within 4 or 5 days. I went from going to school in high school and all of a sudden I'm standing on yellow footprints out here in MSgt San Diego. So
going back to your brother real quick, when basically the Army, for no better terms, kind of screwed him over, did he step away from the military or did he end up going in, but in a different branch himself?
He ended up just stepping away completely. So. And
from your parents' perspective, they supportive of you, both of you and your brother going in the military?
Yes, they were always very supportive of me. And like even with mine versus my other brother, because when he went in, he got to sign on his own. Obviously, their consent too, but he was 18 by the time he graduated and then went in. I was still underage, so they had to, sign consent for it. So, but they've always been very supportive in what I want to do, and they knew that my mind was set on that, and they weren't going to change it. Either they supported me and helped me get to where I wanted to go at that time, or I was going to go, against their will once I was 18. So,
but you were in a unique position, still being relatively new when 9/11 happened. Right. From your parents' perspective, obviously, you're an adult at that point. You're going to make your own decisions. But was there any change in their attitude of like, oh shit, this just got real? Because prior to that, I mean, we had, the Gulf Wars, but they really weren't that kinetic.
Right. Well, I didn't see a big change with them. They stayed, I think, just very optimistic and supportive. And they didn't, I think they stayed strong in the aspect of, being like, hey, love you, support you, be safe. They never like took their worries and didn't throw up on me over it.
Right.
They were just like, hey, just do your best, love you. Go forth and do great things. And, that's just the mentality we kept. I didn't, talk a lot about it with them. They really didn't, not saying that you shouldn't talk about it, but that was just kind of like our dynamic. Like I knew I had their love and support. They didn't be like, oh my God, you need to get out now. It was always still supportive even when I was still wanting to stay in, during the conflicts.
Right.
And it was still good.
Did your dad serve?
No.
Any other in your family?
Not immediate family. So I had some uncles that were not blood, but through marriage that had served. One had served in, I want to say my Uncle John served in the Army, and Jerry as well.
What I'm getting at is there wasn't a big history in your family of service. It was kind of you and your brothers kind of forged your own path going that way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So far as immediate family, absolutely. So older brother, he was the initial one that kicked it off, even though that didn't kind of work out like how we thought it was going. And then I went forward from there.
That first enlistment, were you thinking just that enlistment and getting out, or was there any kind of thought in the back of your head of making it a career?
There already was that early. I wasn't, 100% on there, but I'd always had at the time, I always had these different goals already set in my mind. Like, hey, I want to be at least this rank and have done this or that. And so I just kept going from there because I kept attaining or hitting those goals. And, obviously you get that sense of pride and you feel good about making those goals. And it's like, well, and I liked what the structure of what it was, and I was good at it. So I just kept doing what I was good at.
Coming out of boot camp, you got assigned to the Naval Academy, correct?
I did.
Is that a prestigious position or a kind of sought after position?
I'm going to call it a unique position. So at the United States Naval Academy Company, which was disbanded in 2006. So It's no longer an actual duty station for enlisted Marines. At the time, ones that went over there were like, they had the Yankee White program, which are the ones that, guard at the White House or Air Force Ones. They do the silent drill platoon up there. That wasn't that, but you were attached to that battalion. And so technically it was assigned to like the security forces side of the house.
Okay.
So we still went through the security forces training and stuff like that, but we're a security forces company out of, Norfolk. So, I guess it was kind of a luck of the draw. So went there, and the unique thing about that is we stayed across on the naval station side, across the bridge from the academy, and got to go do some good training there. It's kind of like we worked for hand in hand with the DoD police and stuff like that. So it was a mix between security forces and the military MP position, essentially. Like still had authorities to, detain and or arrest people, and obviously, escalation deadly force, whole 9 yards, as you're very familiar with. And I love that because it gave a really nice, well-rounded, background to go forth with in the Marine Corps. And
I saw that you also went through ASP training early on in your career. Was there a thought of maybe going towards the MP route?
Actually, I thought for about 2 seconds.
Put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah. Just because I just seen like I had got to talk to a couple other people that went that route, and it just didn't sound like it was like the bee's knees to them. So to me, I was like, okay, maybe that's not everything I thought it was, made out to be.
Is that almost kind of a limit to your career, so to speak? Kind of put smaller parameters of what you're able to do? I
would say so. I think it started, like I said, really kind of giving me a rudder steer towards the direction I wanted to go. And outside of that, like you got to meet a lot of really cool individuals at the Naval Academy. Some good networking. I didn't know it at the time, but like you meet some of your future leadership there, which I didn't know or was naive to, but I was doing my job. Quick funny story. My very first, second lieutenant, or butter bar as we call him, when I got to the infantry side of the house, ended up being one of the Naval Academy students, and I ended up locking him out of the gate. And I was like, no, you're late. It's like they get in trouble when they're not late. They get reported and stuff like that. And he's like, I remember you. And I was like, oh shit. Here we go.
You're like, can you please just forget that aspect? We're good. Let's move forward.
Hopefully so.
Later in your career, you actually went to a chemical weapons team too, or a chemical.
Yeah, it was a chemical biological incident response force.
What drove that? That almost seems like what you would want to run away from.
That is completely the monitor's fault. They always say you get lied to by the recruiters. I got lied to by the monitor. Just brass tacks. He was like, yeah, it's like being in the security force, getting like on a fast team, just, CQB stuff with, gas mask, stuff like that. And it was like, that sounds pretty awesome, right? At the time, it sounded no.
Until you get in all the gear.
It was not that. So it was definitely not what it was led on to be. And even though it was also another kind of unique unit, because it was out in Indian Head, Maryland. So I was back in Maryland again. And that was after I was with 2-3 and 3-3 and a couple of pumps. But that duty station by itself, so it was cool because, I got to train in Canada, New York Fire Department, Indiana. We got to do a lot of different unique things that you wouldn't think you would do in the Marine Corps. However, it was there's a lot more administrative, a lot more just like firefighter type stuff, in which I was like, okay, this is not what I'm talking about. 0311. Like I'm supposed to be, running and gunning and, training, getting ready to deploy or going on MEU or something. And that was not it. But so actually I ended up upsetting, I'll put that lightly, my first sergeant at the time, because we were right next to Quantico, which is where all the monitors for the Marine Corps are. And I was like, I'm just going to drive up there and talk to them, which, chain of command, you're supposed to go through them, especially when you're asking to leave a duty station early. And so he was like, I don't know, because he obviously the monitor knew. He's like, hey, does your command know you're talking to me? I'm like, no. He's like, okay. And I was like, hey, well, whatever spot you can fill, right? I'll take anything. So he's like, all right, you're going to 29 Palms. It's a beautiful place. I'm like, sure.
It sounds amazing.
It is, and I found out how amazing it was. So ended up getting orders there, and it was about a week later, and I was, out doing something on the computer, and all I hear is, my last name. There's like, Mensen, get the fuck in here. And I was like, oh shit. So yeah, he about came across the desk on that one, but that was kind of a fun little story on how I got out of there. But because I ended up only being there for about 2 years, a little over 2+ years, versus a full 4-year duty station, or minimum of 3 years is what they're like.
You ended up making it to MSgt, and you went in a little later in your career.
Yes.
Almost, about the 10-year mark, correct?
Correct. It was around 9 when I took selection.
Did you feel old at that point going through selection compared to the other guys?
A little bit. And I say it because you're as young as you feel, right? Or how you ever take care of yourself. But I think it's because my mindset was there to do so. But I did feel old in the as far as just the rank goes, because that's how they look at you, right? It's like, oh, well, you're a lot older or whatnot. And it's like at one time, either recon wasn't taking staff NCOs, but MSgt was. It flip-flopped like within that 2-year time frame that I was looking into it. And reason not as much as like, let's say if it happened now versus then, is because I was in the first, within the first 3 to 5 classes of a structured individual training course after selection. So a lot of the guys that were coming into it were either, former recon guys or a little bit older on the infantry side, because they're also gaining experience as they were building out MSgt as a unit.
And you ended up coming towards the end of your career, moved into more of an admin type role. How was that transition for you?
That initial transition for me was a little bit rough. I mean, I was still in the community, and, had a little bit of rough ending with on the team side of the house. And it was like, hey, I had other good leadership there, or guys that were still asking me to come out either to their company or the team again. And then I was like, well, if I do that, I'm literally going to come right up to the butt end of my career and have no time to transition at all. Because I always hear horror stories about that, right? People waiting until the last second within the last 3 months or month or even 3 days, be like, oh, I need to check out. And it's like, that's not right. I've seen a lot of people set up for failure in that way, especially because bluntly, like a lot of commands, like you become your number at that point. They don't care. Like, we'll use you all the way until the day you get out. And I had another good friend, name is also Derek. He was an officer, but he was on the support battalion side. Like I said, still in the Raider battalion community. And we still get to facilitate the teams because that's where all the enablers are trained that facilitate or integrate with the teams. And he was like, hey, I need a replacement for the battalion operations chief out here. And it was a good fit, and it allowed me to have time to go to programs like the Honor Foundation, to help you find your golden thread and your why and move forward. And at the end of like that program, while still in as well, because of the network of the Honor Foundation, I ended up finding out about USC had a program that was called MBV, which is the Master of Business for Veterans. And that allowed me to go right into that even while I was still on active duty. So on the weekends, I was able to, drive up to LA and go to school. And by proxy of that, through the MBV program or USC network, I was at an information session. That's where I met my 2 current business partners right now with Trident Coffee, and just kind of, steamroll from there.
So when you came, and I'll use the term, when you came off the line and took an admin role, was it your choice and you were going to utilize it to start working your transition, or was it kind of thrust upon you and then you just went, let me make the best of this situation?
It was initially it was thrusted upon me, and then I took it as like, well, I'm going to exploit this opportunity for myself. And honestly, I had to look at it in a selfish light, because up until that point, like I said, in the servant leadership role, it was always about the teams. Guys come first, just no matter what, team. And then I was like, hey, what about you getting ready to get out? I'm going to be under 2 years. Let's figure this out. And that's when I started, talking around to other people and, friends that have been around a while or guys that just got out, and be like, hey, what would you do different? And that was helpful to me. And so it's like, and that's the best advice I would give anybody, or at least people I talk to, whether it's you're affecting one person or a bunch of people that hear you out, is, I mean, it's great to, use going through is take that time for yourself when you're getting out. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people don't do that, or they always, everybody's putting themselves second, which, in the end is only hurting you and your family. So
before you started the Honor Foundation and ultimately going into USC in their master's program, was there a plan for your after military career? Were you thinking about anything already?
I was. What I initially was thinking about, so I was also an avid home brewer. right? So for actual alcoholic side or the beer side of the house. And so I'd already started doing a program. It was like qualification courses after I did the USC program. So I got to use that and it really opened my eyes on the entrepreneurship side of the house with their program. And I was like, okay, this is something I could really get into. And so I got all lined up, and well, the whole pandemic debacle kind of messed that up, because the program I was going to go to was it was like a brewing academy, if you will. And it was going to be like 3 months in Chicago, another 3 or 4 months in Munich, Germany, to become like an international diploma master brewery and stuff like that. Just really good baseline. Not that you have to have that to start your own brewery, but that was the whole.
Doesn't hurt to have that in your backpack going into the door.
Exactly. So having that extra credentials behind it, and plus kind of getting you more in that mindset. It's like, hey, if I go immerse myself into this, it'll be a lot smoother going into that. Well, that was canceled. So, and happened to be during that time that it was canceled, I guess call it a good draw of luck. I utilized the SOCOM Warrior Care Coalition program as well on my way out to, it's just for an internship. There's another program too that's like that. I forgot what it's called, but for like all the military. And through that, I got introduced right before I was trying to figure out who I was going to do an internship with. I had met my business partner and the founder of Trident Coffee at the USC information session. It was like, hey, I was like, why don't you come down and, check us out? And so I was like, all right. And plus the great thing about that, and also, having a fellow military member, someone you're working with, or as an internship, they understand and allow you to, hey, I got these medical appointments, for the VA and stuff like that in order to get your paperwork straight for my retirement or your transition out. So that was kind of like a no-brainer to me. It's like, all right, so I'll be able to help them out in whatever capacity I can and kind of see what it was about. Plus it was a brewery itself, because, as Trident Coffee is a brewery itself, just brew out of bright tanks and fermenters, just like a brewery does. I'm like, well, I want to go into that. So it just made sense naturally to do so.
But Trident Coffee was already up and running when you got your internship.
Yes, sir.
And from the beer side of the house, did you do any of the research? I mean, besides going to those classes, what else would it have taken for you to get a company off the ground producing beer?
That one, well, actually, the biggest would be money. It'd be raising money through friends and family, and then find location to start. I think the biggest expense on that from doing a financial feasibility analysis was the equipment, and then finding the space, which the space around, especially, if you're going to be in Southern California, is a dime a dozen. But I was originally actually looking in Texas or my home state at that point, because I was like, hey, well, the upfront starting cost would have been cheaper, in Iowa or Texas. So
I guess where I'm going with it is the amount of product that you need to have on hand.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about breweries that I've been into. It seems like a very large quantity of storage requirement for a beer company, because you need to be able to put out a large amount of product to make yourself viable, correct?
Sure.
And so that's where I was thinking about it. It's like, how much is it what you remember, if you have not staying on top of it, what's the barrier for entry to get into a productive brewing business from the beer side of the house, from a cost perspective?
Cost perspective, like starting out wise, I mean, it was around like $350,000, but that, like I said, that was a different state. As far as brewing capacity, it gets really tricky with beer. I mean, I would say the minimum I wanted to start with, was 20 barrel capacity. However, I have seen ones that are like microbreweries and stuff like that. They start at a much lower, but you're brewing constantly, because, you got your 4 to 7 weeks where it is to ferment, and then, for it to mature and actually put on tap.
From what you guys are doing today at Trident, because if I'm understanding correctly, the backbone of your product is cold brewed coffee.
Yes.
How much of what you knew coming in as a brewer directly relates to what the coffee process?
So the correlation to that was actually pretty uncanny, or it was very seamless, it was great. And I was like, holy cow, everything's pretty much the same processes except for the fermentation side. And the beauty part about it is, with coffee, it's less ingredients, it's cleaner, like overall, because you're just dealing with the coffee grains. And everything, like all the processes stay the same. So like, putting in them, method of procedures or MOPs or SOPs was all just, I was able to input all that, what I had already set aside to build out the operations side of the house for Trident.
From an alcohol perspective, can you spike a nitro brewed coffee?
You can spike anything. I mean, you could, yes. Like example, like we don't have one that's spiked, but one thing we do that gives a flavor of a whiskey, we have a barrel,
bourbon barrel
rested. Thank you. Product that it's still non-alcoholic, but so that's like a process you could do. We actually just play on the old fashioned out of our daily rations, or just a rotational coffee that we use on tap.
Were you a big coffee guy before you started going down?
I was not at all. I said, telling on myself here. I didn't know that much about coffee. Honestly, when I first, met them and went there, I was like, the cold brew wasn't really my thing. I was like, yeah, it's okay, not good. And because I didn't understand, I wasn't educated enough about it, and didn't understand how pure and different taste notes come out of a good cold brew, and actually one that's done correctly. So I'm definitely a big fan now. But when I originally came into it, I didn't really know much about it. I just like, hey, I just want my hot cup of coffee. And I was, I guess, quote unquote, one of those guys that's like, hey, 7-Eleven coffee, any coffee, nothing against their coffee, but any gas station coffee was good. Right? I was like, oh, it's fine. Just need it in a pot and that's it. And it's like, no, that ain't.
Could you drink it today?
No, I avoid it. I avoid it at all costs today.
So for those of us who aren't coffee aficionados, what is cold brewing, and what's the difference between what we're used to and in a hot brew, is it simply just brewing it with cold water?
Yeah. So without going down a complete rabbit hole on the chemical side of it, so brewing water is very important, just like it is in beer brewing or weather brewing. So, we got our regular tap water, but we use reverse osmosis. We add minerals to it to make sure the pH levels. When you cold brew something, it's less acidic, right? And it also keeps in the flavor notes. So versus hot, when you heat something up and expand it, you're going to lose the flavor notes that are in it. Or just like some retort cans, like retort being, they rapid heat expand it and it crashes and it's heated again. So that way it becomes shelf stable. And you can store it dry or not cold. So when you keep it in the complete cold brew side, like I said, you retain all those flavor notes that are within that coffee bean. And like I said, to my surprise, just like there's many different types of beers and ways you can make it, coffee, there's, thousands of tasting notes and different ways you can do that to extract that flavoring. So it's, I find it very intriguing, and like when we do research and development on it, there's so many different things we can do to try to bring a new coffee out.
I've heard the terminology nitro cold brewed. Is every cold brew nitro infused, or is that two different boats?
It's two different boats, because you just have your regular cold brew, or you can infuse it with nitrogen. We specialize in nitro cold brew, so everything we do, whether we can it or off our taps, is infused with nitro. So
going back to you going to the Honor Foundation and then eventually USC, and this goes even way back to talking about you being in high school and not really digging school. What was the catalyst for you to see the importance of advancing your education?
I guess so. Even up until the point of going to the Honor Foundation, I was always like, never stop learning. Like whether it is, reading a book or trying something new, whatever that case may be. And because school is never really much of my thing, but honestly, through being in the special operations side of the house, like we were constantly going to schools. We're in schools, we were, deploying for training or deploying and then coming back and just rinse and repeat. And I noticed when I realized I wanted to do something I was passionate about, whether it was brewing or what have you, I was like, I need to be the subject matter expert on it. So I need to continue to learn about it. And then if I wanted to start my own business, I was like, I need to understand. I mean, sure, we could, just as any good law enforcement or military guy, we're resilient and we'll skull drag through anything and make it happen. But I wanted to have that background or framework to have a better understanding on it. So I wasn't just, constantly filling and then having to pick myself up and do it again. So failing forward is a great concept, and just keeping at it. But if I could figure out how to do it, or at least surround myself with the people that know how to do it better, then learn from them, versus saying, "Oh, I know how to do it." Because that's one thing I know. I don't know if you might run the law enforcement side, but military side, some people are very stubborn. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know this." It's like,
no, you don't, not at all.
You don't have to know everything. I was like, you can be the jack of all trades, and master of none is better than master of one. And so I guess trying to answer your question directly, that's how I seen that. I was like, I felt it was, paramount for me to, further my education in the business side of the house, since we were in the professional business before being, in the soft side of the house, but not in,
the business side of the house,
the actual business side of the house.
Did you find yourself start seeking out mentors, or did you have mentors who had maybe already made their transition out, who were guiding you?
So the Honor Foundation actually provided that for me. I didn't realize how important, mentorship was at that point. I mean, outside your, normal military guys that were your direct leadership or mentorship, but they actually provide you with a coach or a mentor to start with, and then sometimes you stay with them, sometimes you go off and find someone else, but then they tell you, and that's where I learned about you're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And then, like I said, always seeking that self-improvement, just like some of our core mottos, through the military. And that showed me there, just hearing a different perspective that maybe wasn't from the same mindset that you're used to, or at least in my case, for the last 20 years. That was huge for me.
Did you have, were there guys that you had served with who had made their transition out and become successful that you could kind of model yourself after, or were you kind of going down this path on your own?
Initially, it was kind of a path on my own. I really didn't have too many close friends. Not that I didn't have close friends I'm saying that got out.
Nobody likes you. It's okay.
It's okay.
Just admit it.
I've accepted it. So if you don't like me, man, piss off. But it was either I'd stayed in longer than them, so all my other friends already gotten out. But it was all more like, and nothing wrong with it, because I almost went into just straight blue collar work, what I did before. Like, a big part of me, I thought about going into the federal law enforcement side, or this or that, and just going into entrepreneurship side.
Yeah. Don't try to say the word.
Cut that one. Big word.
Then they get fancy and they try to say and it just...
Veterepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing. It's a word now. So, but with that, entrepreneurship.
We'll come back around to it. It'll eventually get there.
Sometimes. With that being said, like, I didn't have any
fire in the machine gun. I'll just walk the rounds in, and I'll eventually get on target.
Just walk on. It's just like success with bracketing. So we're getting after it. Let's see. Up until then, like, there was someone I never actually worked with, but I was able to bring on as a mentor that had started a beer brewery as well. So that was one there. But as far as my friends that had gotten out before me or during the same time I was getting out, they're all doing the more of the, maybe as a corporate side or they went into law enforcement or what have you, or some, unfortunately, like a lot of military people do, or people that retire in general, they get out and they are happy. I'm just going to go sit on the couch or whatever. So I didn't, it was more on my own accord. I know that was a very long-winded answer to get around, but.
Taking it back a little bit. So you came into the soft community later in your career, You're about 10 years into it. You got out at 20. Was there ever a thought in your mind of, hey, maybe I'll push it out beyond 20?
That was a thought. At my 19th year, actually, I put together a full warrant officer package for to be a gunner. And I had it all together. I was going to submit, and then I was like, well, that commitment's going to be at least 5 years. I was like, well, that'll put me at basically 24, 25 years. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, is this really what I want to do for another 5 years? So the thought was there. And then just staying what I was doing was also there, because I was, in the below zone for, E9. And they were offering a little bit of bonus at the time. And at that point, to be frank, also towards that latter half of my career, before I started that transition phase, I was honestly becoming kind of a shit show, like just a shell of myself, and, you know, figuring out what I want to do, where I wanted to go. And it's like, when you stop, I was told by a wise man once, when you stop having fun, that's when you know it's time to get out. And I was definitely at that point. So I was like, well, need to seek help, you know, because everybody's stubborn especially in our communities, you know, and they're like, you know, I can do it. They're going to keep going until their body just completely breaks down. And unfortunately, we need to get out of that mindset. And I was fortunate enough to, you know, have people around me to help me get into that space.
When you say you were a shit show, was it just merely you were losing interest in it, or were you actually being, I'll use the term, negative to yourself and doing bad things to yourself?
Negative in the way it was like, you know, like just trying to drink away problems, you know, alcoholism, you know, not staying, you know, and not working out as much. Just the care factor just wasn't there anymore, outside of the not having fun part. You know, because and I can't speak for everybody, but like, you know, everybody goes through their own shit, and whether it's a PTSD or acute anxiety or depression, going ups and downs, but just not really seeking out the help for that is where I was at that point. It's just kind of a dark spot, which I think, you know, everybody goes through, at least in some, you know, fashion of the sense. And it actually came collapsing down. Like it really affected, because I was married at the time as well. And it was to the point where it just affected all my relationships, you know, friendships, my command relationship even. And that's where I was kind of thrust into the admin job. And it was like, that was probably a blessing in the sky at that point. So, and then from that point too, then working on self, but also trying to seek out other things outside of the pharmaceutical world. So, and it's like, sure, I'm not a medical profession, but everything that I've experienced from, you know, everything they just want to push drugs on you. And it's like, it just made you feel numb or a shell of yourself, and you just blah, you're just sitting there like a damn lump on a log. And so I try to, you know, seek out alternative things, especially after I got out, and like got into like more like the plant medicine side of the house, and seeking out foundations that are, you know, trying to do, you know, study, especially with veterans, with that to help them and improve, you know, their way of life and self-growth.
Have you done psychedelics yet?
I have.
Did you find that it was beneficial for you?
Yes, I have found it very beneficial. I've got in the realm of whether it was, you know, I guess psilocybin, like microdosing through that, and or like even the ayahuasca retreats and stuff like that. I've even tried like the ketamine side, or like ibogaine, but I found the most resource-wise helpfulness was through actually ayahuasca retreats. And I'm a big advocate for that. And it's like, I know some of it's taboo for people to think about or talk about, but
I think unfortunately it still has the negative connotation from the 60s. And right. We have to step away from that, because we're seeing every day that it's having a huge benefit to veterans.
It is. I mean, I've been a lot, I guess, clear, you know, calmer, a little bit more gaining clarity on like really figuring out what you want to do. And you can go do it and go back to where you're at, because you still have to do the work going forward. But I would actually give a shout out to a really great nonprofit veteran organization called Heroic Hearts. They are I think they're on the forefront of pushing that medical research to trying to get that a known commodity of what it can actually do for you and, you know, fellow veterans. So
I do want to go backwards a little bit.
Sure.
Total number of deployments between just total your entire time in the Marine Corps.
So total was, let's see, I think it was 6.
And once you were in the Raider community,
yeah,
you were saying that you kind of you found your cliff and kind of fell off it a little bit. Did it come on slowly or suddenly from what you can remember?
So in hindsight, I can now say it was slowly. I just never realized it. At the time, it felt like a cliff because it was almost like remember the Price is Right show, and they had the little yodeler going up slowly. That's what it reminds me of. And I was like,
I didn't think you're old enough to remember that.
Come on now. It was Bob Barker age, right? Not whoever it is now. I think it's Drew Carey. But, I was like slowly going, your pack's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And then you're just like, I think it came on a cliff, but it was noticeable if I would have just been paying attention.
With time behind you now, going back to being married at that time, was your wife pointing out stuff at that time that you were discounting that she was saying?
There was some stuff, yes, for sure.
Now to jump forward, and I've talked to different people about this, what would your opinion be of, obviously the psychedelics provide a benefit, but if you're still in your active time where you potentially need to redeploy, would there be a benefit for, if we could get the government to get to this level, to actually let soldiers and Marines and sailors go to a treatment like this while they've still maybe got 4 or 5 years left and potentially another deployment? Or should it be something where, okay, you're a year and a half out, we're going to pull you off the line, you're not going to redeploy, and this is one of your transition processes?
First, two parts of that. I think it would be a great thing as the transition portion of it, and for my opinion, and that would be phenomenal, I think, especially towards the end. But however, there is help that's needed prior to that. And like I said, it's just not identified maybe early enough. And almost part of a maintenance wise, because for ayahuasca, for example, like it doesn't sit there and just stay with you. You're not like high for weeks on it or nothing like that. It's just, it's a ceremony. It's in, it's out, it's done. And then you do your work from there. So to me, if they actually set apart a time, just like they do for, hey, you're going to go to a 3-week school. If you go to a 2-week program, for instance, I think that would be largely beneficial as well, even in the middle or during their path, if they're still in.
Now that you've gone through it, do you think you'll go through continued treatments?
Yes. Yeah, I already have done several.
Having gone through multiple, from your experience, is there a benefit to a little bit more time gap, or how long was the time gap between your experiences?
So one was, that was about 3 or 4 years was between the first time I did it to the second. And then after the second was about 2 years. So generally they actually recommend, they say, no earlier than 6 months, but like usually about a year is a good time to wait to let it, everything subside, because it's quite the process, right? There's horror stories about it, but it's not always that. It depends on whatever your need to work on and what need gets out on. It's very unique on the way it shows you.
On the low level coming out of that, do you also talk to a counselor regularly?
Yes, I have been very regularly, and then even for example, for that program that I just mentioned with Heroic Hearts, they actually provide you a facilitator. And they do follow-on integration calls. You do, I'm not going to call it intense, but like you do 3 or 4 integration calls with a group, and you do the 3 or 4 with your individual facilitator, and also post retreat as well. And they're always there to stand by and help you if you need anything. So that's been also helpful as well, whether you're just talking about your experience in life, or if you need help, looking at something else, or referring, a friend. So they cover all spectrums.
You work for a veteran-owned company. You guys are all veterans. Does it, and obviously this is just your perspective, does it benefit you to stay in that environment where you still feel like you're connected to your veteran community in business? Or do you think that some people might need to completely step away and say, all right, I just need full separation from this?
I think, obviously that's someone's individual journey on how they are. However, for me, I love still being around at least some of that, right? That's so why, like, even the USC program was almost like a transition program in itself for me. Even though we were learning business, you're around all veterans. So it really helps keep that camaraderie, because one of the biggest things that people do, it's almost like separation anxiety, like with a baby, right? And when you get away from the military, all of a sudden it's like people lose themselves. And even with me, it's like you forget who you are, what you even like doing. And so having that sense of camaraderie and those people around you, I think really help at least, not necessarily keep you going, but it still serve a purpose, right? And still help facilitating others and being there for one another, knowing how to lean each other or leaning on each other.
The USC program is a graduate program, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you had to have your undergrad degree prior to that. Had you already, what I'm getting at is when you went to get your undergrad degree, was there a purpose in mind and what you thought you were going to do with that?
So, yeah, the purpose when I was doing that, so I did my undergraduate with Norwich University, which is technically, it's a brick and mortar college. I think it's an Army college actually out of Vermont. However, it was all online for me, and I was doing that when I was an instructor at the schoolhouse at the Marine Raider Training Center. And when I was doing that one, it was strategic studies and defense analysis through like Homeland Security work. Because at that point is when I still thought I was going to go into either, DEA or FBI or something like that to utilize, the skill sets I've acquired through, MARSOC and the Marine Corps, and also taking that degree and being like, okay, I can transition this into a second federal retirement. And that's how I was looking at it at that point.
So from your perspective, then, anybody who has the opportunity to get their advanced degree, you're for it.
Absolutely.
Going back to Trident now, being a veteran-owned company, they also have their hands in a lot of veteran nonprofits. What organizations are they involved in, and what do they offer to veterans?
So outside of attending USC and we're associated with the MBV Foundation there, we also are big supporters of Active Valor, which they are a big nonprofit for Gold Star families. So for children that have lost their parents during service. So that's kind of like a child mentorship program that we like giving back, so you can get involved by Active Valor. We've also support MVP, Emerging Veterans Players. A lot of that's become a little bigger now with Nate with putting his movie out. So we associated with them, and then eventually, can't speak for the whole company now, but like a Heroic Hearts project. Eric and I have both attended that. But I would encourage anybody outside of, a business pitch is get involved with them for any kind of, psychedelic or plant medicine help if they feel they need so, or if they're called to do so.
For you going forward, what takes up your, obviously outside of work, keeping your Rubik's Cube between your ears kind of dialed in? What do you like to do to keep yourself grounded?
Keep myself grounded, or grounding. I do, and I still enjoy going out for hikes, trying to get a little bit of camping in there. Anything on the water, just whether it's mostly paddleboarding. I guess for me, I'm not very good at surfing, so try to fix that. Let's see, what else? Honestly, just trying to reconnect with friends and family. Spending time with my lady now. We're actually in downtown, so like going to sporting events or comedy clubs or something like that. Something a little more integrative. Trying to get back out with the community. Every once in a while, we'll do beach cleanups with Trident Coffee as well. Like trying to support local and grow from that, and trying to set up like traveling to see family too. Because since I'm been away from them for so long, it's always nice either getting them out here or having them come in. So, nothing too crazy. Like hitting up the range every once in a while. So kind of keep, steel sharpens steel type thing. Keep up on some skill sets there. And I do like I said, water-wise, scuba diving. Probably only annually, like once or twice a year, I'll go, skydiving still. I do enjoy a little bit of that adrenaline rush here and there. Horseback riding is very therapeutic to me as well.
Do you try to place yourself in groups or organizations that are veteran based? For a lot of those events you're talking about, like the horseback riding, scuba diving, paddleboarding, I know, especially here in the San Diego area, and I'll loosely call the Temecula area, San Diego area.
Sure.
There are
county.
Yeah,
So
actually, no, it's the farthest city south in Riverside County. We're right on the border.
Well, hey, every day.
But there are a lot of veteran groups that provide those. Do you find yourself kind of leaning towards or leaning into other veteran groups, or do you kind of like to go out on your own and just?
Not necessarily. I do like to go out on my own still, because I don't want to be, because my only identity is not the military. So I still want to, have my own thing as well. And whether it's with my girl or by myself, just getting out there and, just soaking in the, nature, having my own experience versus having to be with somebody else. And nothing wrong with that. Every once in a while, yes, I still do that, as we, all the associations that we were talking about. But come to learn, when I was at the Heroic Hearts Retreat, I found out there's guys that are just wealth of knowledge. Like, it's huge networking too, right? So they're talking about all these other programs to go out and do, fly fishing or horseback riding or whatever is ATVing or whitewater rafting, that kind of stuff. So I am looking back into that to see what those are all about, and hopefully get some of those experiences in as well.
So going back to your very last push to getting out, and you, for no other terms, you had hit your cliff. You weren't the best operator, so to speak, in the sense of headspace. So they kind of pulled you off the line and said, hey, we're going to stick you in admin. When it was time to actually get out, were you looking forward to it? And then more importantly, once you were out, did you regret being out?
Never regretted being out. I never hit that space where a lot of veterans are like, oh my God, I miss the teams, or I wish I was back in, or they have that yearning to be back there. I never really hit that. The only thing I ever missed was, maybe some of the people, the camaraderie. Because that space I was in, unfortunately, when I got to say, hey, let's take this role right now, I was excited about getting out, but I was scared. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because there's still that uncertainty, right? Because in the military, you get 3 hots in a cot. You're told when to do something, when to work out, where to be, how to do. Everything's very structured, and it's great. But with that, after getting out, the autonomy or the freedom of movement that's there, you don't realize while you're in. And, when you're in a career of service, it's like, it was like a whole new world was opened up. So I was excited, and that's what I started experiencing. So I wouldn't change anything, because I love the platform and what everything was, that was provided or presented to me for me to do what I wanted with it, as far as take advantage of what it was presented to me through the military. And otherwise, because it wasn't for the military, I wouldn't have went through any of those programs. And who knows? I mean, I might be, who knows what state, or back home, maybe, just doing anything. But yeah, I don't know. What else did I miss?
You're in a unique position, not just you, anybody who served from the time they were 18 until they're 38. That's a huge amount of growing up. And what you've experienced has obviously matured you. But like you said, never in that 20 years are you given the autonomy to make your own life decisions. And like, I want to be here today and I'll be there tomorrow. And I would almost wonder if once you have that freedom, if it's kind of like, I don't like being off this leash. I want to go back to, having somebody tell me, hey, be here at this time on this day.
That does happen. I mean, there's definitely been days like that. It's like, okay, I miss like the good old days where it's like, hey, I knew exactly, because I would say I love structure. I'm definitely a creature habit. That's one thing I took from there, was like, I like that in place. And, because it creates efficiencies, and whether in the business or, life in general. So I would say that I do get in, I would miss that part of it, I guess the structure part of it. But I do love the fact of, you actually mentioned it. It's like, hey, if I want to go do this and then transition to here, I can. I don't have to either seek permission, or if I want to go to Mexico because we're right here, I don't have to get permission or I'm not allowed, right? So even though some things are, questionable down there, but just being able to travel out of bounds per se it's nice having that freedom of movement. now. And yeah, I don't know where else I was going with that. Sometimes I still get blank spots too.
Gotcha.
Get TBIs,
Did you, when you made your transition out, did you consciously make the decision to bring a lot of the structure though into your personal or private life? Or did it kind of go off the rails maybe a little bit and had to pull yourself back in?
Well, I'm glad you said that. And it was like, I do keep some of it, but it definitely did go off the rails a little bit. I would say within the first 18 months, now it started to go off the rails a little bit as far as like just going out and just always trying to be with friends or like, partying because of things I missed, right? Oh, I never done this before. And just always constant go, and just kind of burning yourself out. And that definitely did happen. However, I think part of transitioning right into having something to do did help because it still created that structure. And I got to bring that over to there. So I still had a sense of accountability. So I wasn't just left to my own devices completely. So I think that was probably important as far as a growth stage in that transition period as well. Like, because I can understand how, I don't know, you may have heard some people that have retired or gotten out and it's like that you don't hear from them forever, or they just become that proverbial couch bump and that's all they do. They become alcoholic or they just smoke weed or whatever it is all day, and they don't amount to anything, but they don't have any ambition to do anything. They don't serve a purpose anymore, and not necessarily go down a rabbit hole, but that's what we talked about earlier. It's like when, people don't have that purpose anymore, they just sit there and vanish per se.
No, you hit the nail on the head. It's you take away their perception of purpose. And if you don't have something lined up when you make that transition, whatever it is, something that drives you to look forward to the next day, that's when you become that bump on a log who just sits on the couch. Yeah. So it is a catch-22. Yeah, hey, you have all this freedom and you have all this autonomy. You go live your life. Do whatever the hell you want. But if you don't have a purpose in that living, then what drives you to the next day?
Exactly.
For somebody coming out who might be interested in the coffee industry, you talked about how you got an internship with Trident. Does Trident still offer those types of internships?
We do. We still accept those for sure.
And what would somebody be doing as an intern?
So depending on maybe what they're looking to transition to for their future job, or if they don't know, we could exploit them to all different facets, whether it's in the retail side or the operations side, or so within operations, you got the retail, you got the brewing side, you got the roasting side. You also have sales or business development, which is what I initially went into. So there's a couple different things that we can do. We even got like some logistics and warehouse they can do as well.
Do you offer those internships straight in-house, or are they through another program that somebody has to be involved in?
It's through a program they have to be involved in. So, and I apologize, I can't remember the big one. Conventional for all military uses it, and it's I'll leave it right now. But the one I went through, just like if you're in the soft realm, that was the Warrior Care Coalition program. That one's more of a niche one versus the larger scale. So that was. And they got to put in for it. Like we're not like advertised saying, hey, we offer this. They have to put in through that program and say, hey, I want to go with this company. So the best way to do that would just be, reaching out, give us an email and then we can start from there.
And as far as Trident Coffee, where's the growth prospect? Where are you guys looking to end up next?
So right now, we're in our 5th year going on 6. As far as we're working on our 3rd retail location. So our main production facility and manufacturing facility, we're all self-manufactured, by the way, fun fact, out of Imperial Beach, California, and our tap room there.
I'm going to pause you there. What does it mean to be all how did you refer to it?
Self-manufacturing.
What does that mean?
So all in-house production is done by us.
Oh, okay.
So we're not outsourced. We don't co-pack. We don't get co-packed by anybody else. Everything gets imported to us in the raw green bean fashion. We roast it to our own specific profiles. We grind it, bag it, brew it, steep it. We can it, infuse it, keg it. We bag our own beans. So everything is done by us. So we control our own destiny with that. and which is a very powerful in a lot of steams. And even in the small place we're in, we've grown to a nationwide brand with Sprouts, 26 different states currently right now. And then our 3 tap rooms, 2 of them currently open, like I said, Imperial Beach and then Coronado Island off of Orange. And then our 3rd one is currently being built out in Pacific Beach right now. And the plan there is, it's like being a San Diego local owned brand and 100% veteran owned, is to grow Southern California and kind of do like a quote unquote San Diego takeover, if you will. So, and then, we got people, especially in the military, that they'll ask, hey, when you guys coming up to Carlsbad or Encinitas, Oceanside, especially, or outside of Pendleton. So we would love to get up that way as well. And we even got people talking about LA too sometimes. So just want to,
Nobody goes to LA.
No, right? I don't understand that either.
Everybody's trying to get out of LA.
So yeah, just trying to facilitate the greatness of cold brew to everybody here and experience it. being especially in the health and wellness side of the house, that's where our category is, because we're like the healthy version of Dunkin' Donuts, if you will. So we're 0 sugar, less acidity, USD organic, no dairy, gluten-free, everything that San Diegans love in the health and wellness space. That's what we are and strive to be.
Just hide all those titles so everybody else think they're just drinking regular old coffee.
Right.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All the best going forward.
Thank you. You as well.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.